This is going to be good because I'm going to keep that I'm naming this as my fourth try, and that's how we're going to start the video. So, okay. My name is Richard, and this YouTube channel is called Deep Improv, and it's about using creativity in the service of personal growth. And this is Paley, who I'm going to be speaking with today. He'll introduce himself in a second. We are going to have a freestyle conversation about the notion of play in relationships, in therapy, in coaching, in groups. There's kind of some sparks that we have from some personal conversations. And so we're just going to see where it goes. So you can contact me at richard@deepimprov.net. And yeah, subscribe to my channel. And Paley, I would like to introduce as well. So you can introduce yourself.
Great. Yeah. So my name's Paley Berlin. I'm a somatic psychotherapist in private practice. I specialize in working with men, and I'm also really passionate about process groups and group work in general. So my business is called Warrior of the Heart Psychotherapy. So you can find me at warrioroftheheartpsychotherapy.com. Yeah.
Great.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Cool. Cool. So you and I had tossed back and forth a number of different ideas, and I was on a bike ride earlier, and this is what came into my head is like, what is play? And does play always have to look playful or be fun or silly, or are there different kinds of play? And so here's what I was thinking, because a mutual colleague, a woman named Vanessa, she was wondering, why am I not more playful in some of my videos that I've been putting up? They're very analytical, you know? And so I've been sitting with that question, like, well, how do these come together? And I was thinking about the analogy of movement, and that to be playful in movement actually requires a lot of seriousness to get there. You need to be very deliberate about expanding your strength, your range of motion, the kind of movement vocabulary that you have. And so, like, the notion of improvisational movement is built upon a lot of seriousness and a lot of training and a lot of like deliberate, intentional stuff that isn't so goofy or so spontaneous. So it's almost like it almost takes a lot of seriousness to be spontaneous. Like you have to build some kind of set of things up. And so I'm kind of struggling with, I would like what I do on my YouTube channel to be more playful. And at the same time, I feel like I'm building a kind of infrastructure for that playfulness if people want it or something. So I'm playing with that. And then, you know, because whenever I'm riding my bike, the ideas just keep popping into my head. Then I thought, but why is being serious not a form of playfulness? At the same time, like the way that I construct ideas can be playful, even if I'm not laughing about it or something, right? So I'm thinking about all this, and then I'm thinking about how you and I talked about playfulness or lack of playfulness with clients, and that could be a whole other. So there's like different trails we could take. So I just wanted to toss that out there, and then we can see what's fun for you. So.
No, I love that. Some of my closest friends have remarked about me that I'm very serious about play. And so it's kind of interesting that you're sort of marrying those two terms together. I was just thinking about how I understand the role or the theme of play in the therapy work that I do. And two words came to mind to kind of describe like a broader way of understanding play that has an element of seriousness to it. Which would be, you know, a kind of exploratory mindset. To me, feels like it's built into, you know, what it means to use play in the service of personal growth. And being exploratory doesn't necessarily mean that you're making jokes or that there's this kind of humor, you know, it can be, so being exploratory and being expressive, to me are kind of two aspects of what I consider to be a part of using play in a personal growth space that can feel like kind of stereotypically playful in terms of, you know, amusement and humor and silliness, but oftentimes isn't. And still, to me, feels like it's in the domain of play, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Definitely. I think about how, like, it's like a stance towards life. right? So like it
Hmm.
seems like the diagnostic mode is like what's wrong and let's fix it. And that's not particularly curious. It's not exploratory. It's not the things that you're saying. It's like
Hmm.
it doesn't invite, an entry into something, or it doesn't open a new possibility when you're trying
Right.
to diagnose somebody. Like it feels like a diagnosis is like a shutting down of
Yeah.
possibilities,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's, the difference between solving a problem as if we already kind of solving a problem versus learning about oneself,
yes,
and if I'm approaching it as learning about myself, there's something inherently playful in that whole enterprise.
yes,
Even if I'm learning things about myself that are painful, that are overwhelming and scary, there's something about like, I don't know everything there is to know about myself. I want to explore my unconscious. It feels like that makes a lot more room for play than this kind of narrow focus on solving a problem, you
yes,
know? Yeah.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of the folks that I work with, it's a little bit of a new concept that there would be this sort of vast kind of psychic territory inside of them that they don't know, and so
Yes.
just how conditioned we are to think we already are seeing everything, and we just need someone to help us solve the problem that we already know everything about.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, what I think immediately is like, what are the messages I would want a new client to know? And that's one of them is like that there is all of this territory to know. And I think that's where some conflict can come in first working with the client, because if they're not aware of that possibility or embracing that possibility, then
Hmm.
it's like you can't do the exploration if you think there's no continent on the other side of the ocean or something,
Right. Right.
like
Right.
you need to set off for something, if it's
Right.
just the Truman Show where you just bump into the wall, then it's like, so
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always that question of like, how do you prime somebody that's maybe never left the village, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you convince them that there's like other lands, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That feels like an important challenge
yeah.
as practitioners. Yeah.
I think what I'm often fighting against is like a cultural structure that is built up around, like, psychotherapy itself has a culture to it. There's so many psychological terms, I guess, that are in the lingo now. People call themselves autistic and neurodiverse and this and that, and they're diagnosing themselves. And I feel like it's almost going in the wrong direction culturally,
Mm, mm, mm-hmm.
where all of this stuff is, and it's like, it's hard to kind of like dismantle that with a new client and be like, can you forget all the stuff you've ever heard about what you think you should know about your own brain so we can make a
Mm-hmm.
discovery? You know,
Yeah.
maybe it's a
Yeah.
big ask.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of that, that might tie into some of the rigidity that I think is sort of taught culturally around kind of personal identity. I think within that is, a kind of rule system around what's what is worth exploring, or what kind of new ways of engaging with oneself or with others is worth one's time, like,
Hmm.
if it's not already familiar to me, um, there's a kind of skepticism about whether there's really any reason to be doing it,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
feels like it really cuts off the possibility for play.
Hmm. The kind of work we do is so challenging because the way I think of it is like you show someone an iPhone and it's like, wow, I see what an iPhone is. You can put it in their hand and they can try it
Mm-hmm.
out. But when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to experiences, it's like, well, there's a thing over there. And if you grind away for 6 months or 6 years, you might start to make some contact with that. And it's like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's not a good sell,
Yeah.
you know? Because
Yeah.
if you don't have the experience, you don't even know what's possible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
There's a couple other things that I'm thinking about with play. And it centers around sort of like a more of a nervous system perspective on play, and
Hmm.
the role of a kind of internal sense of safety as a prerequisite for play to be kind of an option. or a
Yes.
possibility for people. Um,
Yes.
so I see that as one of the biggest barriers, is that it's almost like, to invite somebody who doesn't really know what it feels like to inhabit a kind of embodied sense of safety, to
Hmm.
invite someone like that into play feels like putting the cart before the horse, and
Hmm.
yet there's almost a way that to meet them where they're at, without doing that to them, requires me to sort of put my own playfulness on the shelf, which is one of the most powerful sources of inspiration and creativity that I have available to me. So it's
Right.
like, how do you hold on to your playfulness as a practitioner, um, while not imposing that uh, kind of dimension of experience on someone whose nervous system isn't ready for it.
That also comes back to the seriousness side, where it's like even the like deep dark trauma work for me is ultimately in service to play, but you have to go through those gateways to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so like that's more of that like serious foundation work sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and then at the same time, I feel you. I There is some struggle, like when somebody really doesn't have the capacity, and it's like sometimes I wonder, is this just not an ideal client, or is this just a phase that is just part of my work and I go through it, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe for me the distinction is like, is this person's goal ultimately more playfulness, or do they really just not care at all about getting there? I think that maybe is a distinction for me about like the kind of client that I would imagine wanting to work with. Because like I've worked with clients that do want more playfulness, but then we've got to do some really deep, heavy stuff. And then I've worked with people that just they don't care, they don't want it. Feels like the possibilities aren't going to open up.
I feel like this is maybe a controversial stance, but there's something that I don't like about the expectation of therapists to not have an agenda for their clients. It
Mm,
feels a little um, customer servicey, and
mhm,
because I think that yeah, I think anybody that I work with, um, it's hard to imagine myself not seeing a sort of flexibility to be playful and an access to playfulness as
mhm,
part of what they need.
mhm, mhm,
And so
mhm,
I'm curious if
mhm,
maybe we're different in that way. Like I feel like I kind of impose on everyone I work with,
mm,
like, this is what I think is good for you, and then if that doesn't work for them, they can choose to leave. But at
mhm,
least that's what I'm trying to do. There's
mhm.
something about just leaving it up to them to decide for themselves that
Yes.
feels to me like that's just doomed from the start. Because if they knew, yeah, there's something about, like, you don't really know what you're missing when it's not there, kind of thing. So how can you know you're
Mhm.
missing it?
I think there's a difference between a kind of imposition that is an offering versus more of a manipulation that you're not even informing the client you're doing, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Like if it's like,
Uh-huh.
I need to convert this person to my ideology, like they don't
Yeah.
believe the right political thing or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
that feels
Yeah.
like a different imposition from like, hey, I think if you were to move into this mode a little more, I think
Yeah.
we could make more progress here. Are you willing to try it out and see how it feels for you?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
feel like one's more invitational and the other one's more like missionary, religious missionary.
So tell
So,
me which category this falls under, to just kind of, be playful a little bit with, how the judgments that I have about what's best for people.
hmm
I would say that I think every human being would benefit from um, finding a way to access the part of themselves that would want to dance, for
hmm
example.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, and not necessarily to become a dancer or to go to dance events, but that there are moments in your life where you hear music and you want to move your body, and you allow
hmm
yourself to move your body. To me,
yes,
that feels like a kind of universally human quality that
yes,
if somebody says I'm not interested in that, um, yeah, I would remain curious about that, and
Mhm.
yeah, I would push on that a little bit.
Yeah, we are operating from our conceptions of human nature. And I would agree. Like, my view of human nature is that we are inherently playful, expressive. The psyche is deep. There's an unconscious, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. But then I also think that, like, in my view, if people pay enough attention in their direct here and now experience, I think they will find those impulses in their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Mm-hmm.
often, like, oh, I'm not a person who dances. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a way of saying I have dissociated from this inherent part of
Right.
my being my whole life and have made no relationship with it,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, I mean, in SE, I believe they call that undercoupling,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
there's a part that's just, disconnected and floating around somewhere, hasn't made that connection. And that comes to the frame too, which is like, are they coming to us to be, to kind of fix a symptom that is pissing them off and getting in their way? Or are they coming to expand their mobility range, so to speak, their
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, their adaptability, their resilience, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and those are just two, like, totally different paradigms of
Yeah.
what life is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm kind of treating everyone like as though they're looking for the latter. And if
Yep.
they happen not to, we're not going to last that long, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of liking that approach these days, you know.
Yeah.
People find their way out if that's not what they're looking for. I'm thinking of like the using interpersonal aggression in the service of play. That's actually like
Mm-hmm.
a really big interest of mine. And
Mm-hmm.
one small way that showed up recently, I have a client who is very his nervous system is habitually in a kind of hypoarousal sort of shutdown dissociated state,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where when I'm sitting with him, I want to fall asleep often.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that he, you know, in his life, there are people in his life, people close to him that have that experience with him.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of deadened quality
Mm-hmm.
to how he relates to people. So the other day, you know, I kind of teased him a little bit of, you know, I didn't actually do it, but I said, you know, I'm having a fantasy right now of just sort of pretending to fall asleep and just seeing, you know, how you react to that. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that was kind of like a titrated way into a certain kind of playful aggression, right? I'm sort of poking at this person in
Mm-hmm.
a way that might stimulate some new experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing it in a playful way about
Mm-hmm.
something that's very serious in their
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Yep.
when that goes well, it's almost like that's opening a door to a whole new dimension of connection and exploration together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that a lot too. When you kind of, like, the titration of it is like you could have just gone to sleep, but you didn't. You were like,
Yeah.
what's it like to imagine doing that? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
like that.
that might have been too aggressively playful for him had I
Yep.
just, because I wanted to do it without saying anything to him, because that's how serious I am about play. Let me do this kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing that's going to shock you awake right now a little bit and be
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
dumbfounding, you know, but that would have
Yeah.
been, I judged that would have been too much for him. So sort of titrating
Yes.
the intensity of the playful aggression, you know, feels important. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And, like, to me, that's like one of the reasons we're paid, and you know, and we're not paying our clients, is because, like, there is some kind of sacrifice on our part, I think, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do our needs meet their needs, and we
Right.
modulate ourselves to meet them where
Right.
they're at,
Right.
right?
Right.
So so there's that, like, there's that balance, and our inner lives are relevant to what's happening. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the sparks we had for this conversation, was like
Mm-hmm.
you wanting to feel less stuck or more playful in more scenarios. And, like, And me too. Like there are some moments where I just feel like totally cornered by somebody's state. It's actually been a while since I've had a client like this, but like somebody that just like straight up puts me to sleep the moment we start
Uh-huh.
talking.
Uh-huh.
Just like
Uh-huh.
instant, I'm just like, I can't, it's like where you're so tired, it hurts in your bones,
Yeah.
where it feels
Yeah.
like it's like 5 a.m. and you're just like, when can I go to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to offend them. I don't want them to think they're so boring or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
And so then I wouldn't say it and I would just endure it,
Right.
you know,
Right.
which
Right.
was not fun for me
Right. Right.
and probably not serving them either in
No, no.
retrospect, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah,
So,
the fear of offending others feels like one of the biggest barriers to making full use of the sort of technology of play, you know. And
yes.
not only from the practitioner to the client, I'm also thinking in some of my groups, um, in the modern analytic approach to group, there's this kind of encouraging of a kind of exaggeration of primitive fantasies and impulses towards others, with the
Hmm.
idea being that we're so accustomed to downplaying those that sometimes we need to exaggerate them on the other extreme to actually get in touch with even the smallest aspect of it that might really be there for us,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
how resistant people are to that for fear of offending others, and it's
Yes.
like, yeah, the idea that we can actually just play with those kinds of expressions of playful aggression, um,
Hmm.
a- and not have to be so worried about other people's fragility feels like an important kind of developmental step almost,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a nuance there too, which is like, how do you show people that they can have this much more expanded inner life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in their daily lives they just go in and act all the stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I
Mm-hmm.
remember
Mm-hmm.
I had a moment again some time ago with a client, and we were getting more in touch with his aggression or something. And so the next time he was like, I had a conversation with my girlfriend and I just said all the things. And I was like, like that was not, like we made a mistake here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's something about that too, about learning to play with your inner life, but having the discernment of like, when are you playing with your inner life and when are you just being like a jerk to someone
Right.
or
And
blowing up a relationship or something?
yeah.
And that there's a discernment there,
Oh yeah, and
right?
I
So,
think one of the protective factors there would be a real freedom and permission and sort of cultivation of playfulness with oneself.
mhm,
Almost like I'm being interpersonally playful with parts of myself internally, so that I'm
mhm.
satisfying that urge for play
Yes.
internally first, so that then I
Yes.
can choose to share that with others. But if it feels like it might not be the moment, I'm not sort of in this state of deprivation. I can kind of have that experience internally, whether I can
Yes.
invite others into it or not. So I'm not sort of forcing others to be a part of it if that's not what they are ready for.
Yes. Yes. That's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. 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 And that's hard. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning that lesson, is like that discernment of like, how do I have access to something that I don't necessarily share or express or bring into a space?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then how do I not feel like, I mean, there's like situations where, let's say I'm in a social group that is, let's say, very ideologically driven in some particular valence,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I can feel that I'm not on their, cultish kick or whatever it might be. And
Yeah.
so then those are those moments where I really struggle, where it's like, I want to play, they don't want to play. I get kind of pissed off or bitter about
Mm-hmm.
it or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so like
Mm-hmm.
the clients bother me less because they're coming to me for something. When I'm not getting paid, I'm more annoyed if I have to deal with this, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
that's a place where I continue to struggle. Situations here in the city where I live where I think I would go and do some things if I had the capacity to accept that my playfulness might be utterly rejected by them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and not even because I want to be mean, but it's just like if I start playing, they're highly nuanced rules about what's okay and what's not okay. I'm going to hit a
Yeah.
tripwire somewhere, and
Yeah.
I always struggle with how do I be in a space like that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
It's certainly a struggle for me too. Something comes to mind. I've taken a little bit of crazy approach to figuring that out for myself in my own life that I,
Mm.
Feels a little bit edgy to even talk about. It could probably be easily misunderstood or sort of, taken in a different way than
Mm.
it feels for me. But I'm reminded of some occasions in the past where it really felt important to me to sort of find out what it felt like to have my playfulness be sort of unilaterally rejected by a group of people,
Mm.
like strongly rejected. And I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the ways that I created that for myself was I remember I was in a pickup soccer league, and it was just a time when I was really exploring social dynamics and self-expression and, safety and what kind of risks can I take around other people? Can I
Mm-hmm.
face the experience of rejection? I was really in this kind of personal growth process. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly what I did, but I was just kind of an asshole, and um, it was kind of, in the vein of competitiveness on the soccer field, but I really overplayed it, like
Okay.
extremely overplayed the competitiveness to the point where my own teammates and the other team were like, leave. Like, we don't want you to play with us.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and there was just something developmentally important for me. It was like, I mean, I wasn't abusing anyone, so there's like a fine line there, but I was
Mm-hmm.
being disruptive enough to the social space that I was, cast out of the group. And I brought that on myself. There was something that I needed from that experience to
Mm-hmm.
soften my own fear and shame around
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
playfulness being rejected by people. Like, I needed to go to the extreme to feel what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could sort of recalibrate and not be so terrified of it in other moments in my life. I don't necessarily
Nice.
recommend that approach, but it's
Yeah.
kind of a funny part of my approach that has
Mm-hmm.
been meaningful for me in my life.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there's some YouTube video I saw at one point, and this guy who decided he was going to go and get rejected by 100 women just so he could get over his fear of being rejected by women,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's courageous. I still I'm kind of, I guess, I'm embarrassed to admit, but I feel like that's still outside of my range of like what I'd be willing to do. Like, I wish I
Yeah.
could do it. It sounds juicy to me.
Yeah.
But speaking
Yeah.
of, where a nervous system is at, I feel like,
Yeah.
like that's too much. But
Yeah.
I do, you know, Borat is like one of my archetypes. I'd like to be
Yeah.
more like Borat. Not
Yeah.
necessarily that extreme. I don't need to walk
Yeah.
around with a little, whatever the little bikini thing is or whatever, but
Uh-huh.
like, but I wish I could do that, particularly during this historical time where everybody's, got their undies in a bunch over everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, it
Mm-hmm.
almost makes me want to do it more, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm so afraid of like the vitriolic screaming person.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
why? I don't know. I've got to do some personal work on that. But like, it bothers me that I can't stay in my playfulness when someone treats me that way. Like, I
Mm.
wish I could have enough center to be like, that's their stuff. And, I'm just going to keep playing with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a comedian that I just started following, this guy, Ryan Long, and he just
Oh
goes and
yeah.
interviews people and
I
just
know
says
him.
the most ridiculous stuff. And
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
so offended by what he
Yeah.
says.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
somehow is able to play with their offense and just keeps
Mm-hmm.
riffing
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
riffing. And he
Yeah.
doesn't seem scared at all. It doesn't seem like he's trying to be tough and
Yeah.
cover it or
Right.
something.
Right.
Like,
Right.
he's
Yeah.
genuinely just having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And this might be too charitable to him, but I don't think so. It brings to mind sort of from like a cultural anthropological perspective. There's this sort of trickster archetype, the
mhm,
sort of sacred clown that I
mhm.
feel like our culture doesn't know what to do with, and
Yes.
there
Yes.
needs to be a place for it. And so I see people like that as sort of inhabiting that pole of the spectrum
Yes.
that's so necessary,
Yeah.
And I think that it's not just professional comedians that may have some impulse inside them to explore that part of the human experience, It's
Yes. Yes.
important. Yeah.
Yes. And that just pivots exactly to your concept earlier of like, well, maybe you don't want to be a professional dancer, but there must be some impulse in you to move your body at some point when you listen to music,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that kind of expanding the range of possibilities,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
I'm the most aware of the ones that I really want to do, but I'm afraid to do. And
Yeah.
this kind of play is one of them. Like, I think I am underneath this probably much more of a trickster if I wasn't so worried about what people would think about me.
Yeah.
And
Same.
I'm mad about that aspect of
Mm,
myself that I'm
mm.
still working on that, you know?
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
And even though I could give you these examples of, so seasons of my life where I felt particularly bold and daring, would I feel ready to do that right now? I don't know. There's like seasons of my life where I kind of revert to a sort of fear of retribution or punish, kind of
Mm-hmm.
this sort of punitive punishment from institutions or the system, that kind of inhibits that side of myself as well, but
Yeah.
I'm with you there. It feels like one of the most powerful tools for growth is that kind of subversive, rebellious, I'm going to like make a mess here and see what
Mm-hmm.
it stirs up kind of energy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to inhabit that space when you have a wing person,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in a
Mm-hmm.
group, but you've got your kind of like person that's in on it with you or something, it makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
My mom used to make me go to church, and I would drag my best friend along with me. And his only goal was to get me to laugh at some point during the
Mm-hmm.
sermon where like you're not supposed to make a sound. And that
Yeah.
was just like every time. And because I couldn't laugh, and then
Uh-huh.
I would have to act like I was really moved by the sermon when I burst out laughing to kind of like cover that I was laughing. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's always like, which then made it even funnier, of course. you know?
Yeah.
So like, I love that dynamic. And I feel like I have a lot easier access than when it's just like me against like an angry group of activists or something, where it's
Yeah.
like, it's just
Yeah.
not as much fun to like giggle internally for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I want to, if we could rewind and go back to a theme that we were talking about earlier. There's a couple of client scenarios that come to mind from recent sessions. One is, I work with this family. They're troubled. It's a mother and father, and then their 3 kids, kind of late teens, early 20s. Being with them feels like being in a pit of self-hatred for an hour, with this like there's a lot of self-hatred in this family. And
Sounds fun.
yeah. Oh, it's a blast. It's a blast. And so, it's the kids are so quick to just attack and shoot down any efforts that these parents make to try to connect, to try to work, repair ruptures in in their relationships. And so it's like, it's very hard to get any kind of traction with this family. And the other day, we stumbled upon a way of relating that felt like for the first time, there's a little spark of joy and connection. And it happened to come through sort of hating other people, like talking in judgmental ways about one of the kids' college teachers that he doesn't like, and everyone in the family is kind of making fun of this teacher who's sort of become this kind of archetype. And it felt like for a moment, even though it's coming at the expense of someone else, right? They're a very judgmental and very critical family. That's one of the ways that they play together. Is through criticizing other people outside of the family. It's one of the only ways that they can unify themselves together. So, I mean, is there something a little bit fucked up about that? Yeah, I think so. If it's the only way you can connect is to like make fun of other people. But you got to start somewhere. If there's no traction of connection to build on, you're going nowhere. And so I was really trying to support that. And the mother, after just a few moments of doing that, really tried to kind of force us into a more serious, discussion of the real issues at play here or whatever. And it just outraged the kids. And I was sort of frustrated with it too. It was like, here we are finally having a little moment of connection that I know you like too, Mom. But I think it's the guilt over this is the only way we know how to connect as a family. And is this therapist judging us for this? Or whatever it was in her, this kind of like, we need to be productive right now. This isn't productive. steered us away from that kind of play. And I think that was a real missed opportunity there, you know? And so that's an example of like, I think there are, you know, darker ways of playing that are important that, you know, in certain relationships are maybe the only place we can start to build connection. You
Right.
know?
To build the, I don't know if I like this word, but it's what's coming up, like the function of play, like that
Yeah.
capacity.
Right.
Like there's something that isn't ossified there.
Yeah.
There's something, you know, somebody that I work with who has like a very paranoid side that is incredibly creative at coming up with threats in the world. You know, so I just point that out. I'm like, this part is so creative. Like, no matter what happens, it just always generates another threat, another problem. Like, you know, just try so kind of naming that even that part is in a way playful, because it's like no matter what he and I do, we're always back to like the same thing. You know,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. For as serious as paranoia can feel, to put a playful spin on it is I think a great approach. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing between our two things is just like noticing when the dynamic of play exists, regardless of the emotional valence of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And regardless of sort of the how it would be characterized by a kind of moralizing, you know, judgment. Right? Of like, oh, you're a bad person if you make fun of other people, kind of thing.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of what I said earlier too, which that's another kind of framework. We could say the moralistic framework is similar to the diagnostic framework, as it seeks to shut something down. Like, you can't play with your anxiety. We need to get rid of this here. This isn't an object to be played with.
Oh man. I mean, that's just, that brings up so much, just hearing that, you know, you can't play with your anxiety, because there's been so many times where I've just wanted to, you know, somebody who's so stuck in their anxiety, but they can't express it with their body, you know, and just inviting them, for example, what if you just start to like shake, you know, and let it take over and like make it go crazy, you know, and just how off limits that feels to people. And it's like, so that, like, we can't play with something that has some real severity and gravity, feels like a major missed opportunity and a misunderstanding of the function of play. It's like, we're not trivializing it. We're finding a creative way to learn about it. You know? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's so important. Like you said it so well, we're not trivializing it. Like, I think it can, maybe people would worry that that's what's going to happen, but no, like this is a way to like befriend it, amplify it, like flesh it out, whatever. So yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about is just I'm thinking of play. Play can be used as a defense against you know, a certain degree of vulnerability or awareness of something that feels more exposing. But also the judgment that engaging in play would not be productive is I think a pretty obvious example of a different kind of defense, right? Against a certain kind of vulnerability in play. So I think of you know, clients that come to therapy with a very rigid sense of like, I need to make the most out of every second. And I've heard you say this, I think, in a previous video, that you really encourage people to approach therapy as like, I want to make the most out of. So I'm curious what you think of this, because I can see the value of that, but there's a way that I think that's misapplied by some people, where it's almost this like, I don't know if it's this sort of macro cultural ancestral kind of religious paradigm of like the Protestant work ethic, like anything playful is almost evil, or, you know, a threat to your very existence, you know. But there's like this severity of seriousness and around productivity that a lot of clients bring into their work with me. That is so stifling and such a straitjacket to live within. And So
That's
that's
right.
one dynamic. There's a lot more I could say about that, but that's one dynamic that I find frustrating, is that I have to sort of like help people recognize that their obsession with productivity
Hmm.
is a threat to their well-being, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love this because there's so many subtleties, and like one of the things that I get kind of tickled by, though I don't know if anybody's been watching the YouTube videos to notice this, is like there are some major contradictions between one
Yeah.
video I make and another.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And there's something to that really, because there are contradictions in life too, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like there's something to have an attitude of like, I'm not going to waste this time.
Right.
And there's also something to like, whatever happens, happens, and I don't need an agenda here. I almost want to put this as like an addendum to my startup video, because that's like the hype man video. But like
Yeah.
the addendum would be like, this isn't about bringing in an agenda of where you need to be by the end of the session. It's about bringing your full self so that
Mm-hmm.
play can occur.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love actually the contradictory aspect of that, sort of make the most of every moment. I love the paradox in that, because I could easily sort of defend that right now in the context of play, that, you know, me sitting in a frozen, stuck, shut down place with a person, instead of following an impulse for play, would be me not making the most of every moment. You know, so it's
Mm-hmm.
like in service of making the most of every moment in this very narrow productivity oriented mode, I
Mm-hmm.
would be failing to make the most of every moment, if that makes sense. You know, so I feel like there's a
Mm-hmm.
way to fit it into a very pro play paradigm, you know, because
Yeah.
it's like play brings joy. We can experience
Mm-hmm.
ecstasy with play. We
Mm-hmm.
can experience freedom. Like, why wouldn't that be just as important as anything else that we're exploring in personal
Yeah.
growth? You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what you were saying earlier, where play can also be used as a defense. And so the
Yes.
question of
Yes.
like, is play deepening or defending? And
Right.
so
Right.
what I'm already taking away from this conversation is just like that play that is really like the kind of play you and I are going for is both like kind of obvious, but also extremely subtle and delicate to actually stay with the thread. There's
Totally.
so many dynamics that come in, and like
Totally.
being able to follow it and have that dynamic discernment of like, you know, what is it? When is it? Is this just anger? Or can we play with this anger? Is this like, is
Mm-hmm.
this a
Mm-hmm.
defense against it? And then sometimes like how kind of inverted things can get, like an angry moment could be playful,
Mm-hmm.
and a playful moment could be a total defense against all the
Totally.
experience that's happening,
Totally.
you know?
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
so like that, I think is like what I struggle with again on the my public presentation in general. Like, how do I communicate all these nuances when I say the way I work is playful, you
Yeah.
know? Because
Yeah.
this isn't me sitting around with Lego blocks or something,
Mm-hmm.
just like,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like,
Yeah.
in a toddler's playroom or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just so unique to the individual. Like the other day, with a client who really struggles to be playful. And, you know, every moment that we're together, or in the past, there would be this intense, you know, any moment of uncertainty or ambiguity, there'd be this intense sort of flooding of shame in him and a sense of pressure to kind of make the most of the moment, know what to do, what's the next
Mm-hmm.
problem to solve, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So with him, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the other day we for 5 minutes played charades together.
Mm.
And that was, and he wanted to do that for the first time. And that was a clear indication of progress, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's completely stepping out of this sort of trauma response that would treat anything other than problem solving mindset as a threat to whatever he's needing for himself, you know. Whereas there's other clients where if we played 5 minutes of charades, it would feel like malpractice almost from me,
Right.
you know? So it's like,
Right.
it's so dependent on the individual, you know?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, one of the ideas for this YouTube channel is to call it Beyond Psychotherapy,
Uh-huh.
because I feel like when you really open to the range of experiences in terms of like what the possibilities are, like Yeah, maybe you play charades with them, with somebody that I work with online. So it's not going to work because he's in a different place. But like, I've had a fantasy of like, he can't go do this thing. Like, maybe he just really needs me to go with him and do this thing with him and help him to process it in real time or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's
Mm-hmm.
this wondering of like what is life asking for, right? Not what are
Yeah.
our agendas asking for, what are the diagnostics, but like
Yeah.
what is trying to happen and how do you work with that? And like, and then that gets to this view that like for me it's an experimental space,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not
Mm-hmm.
a space for something particular but a space
Yeah.
to do new experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that. That kind of comes back to the exploratory, mode. Like that feels like a really important part of what it means to play. This might be repeating something we've already addressed, but I'm just also thinking about in terms of like the kind of the experimental quality to what we're trying to do. Um, and this reminds me of the, are you familiar with the Hakomi method?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, all about doing experiments in a
Mm-hmm.
state of mindfulness and then kind of learning about oneself in the process. What comes up for me when I do this or when I express this. And
Yeah.
so that's a really big part of how I like to work. And there are some clients that when I invite them to experiment with a new way of expressing themselves, a new way of moving their body, for example, um, what I would like, what I would like more of, we've talked about like, what's your ideal sort of client, personality, or, what do
Mm-hmm.
you want more of from your clients? What I would really like more of is less of a kind of defaulting to dismissiveness when you when you try something new and it feels overwhelming and awkward and embarrassing. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's like so easy for people to default to, well, that's just not me, I don't do that, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this is kind of silly and stupid, so therefore it's trivial, right? It comes back to like, if
Mm-hmm.
it feels playful, it's trivial.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what I would like more is for people to really admit, when I move my body in this way, when I express myself in this way, I feel shame, or I feel fear, or I feel a
Mm-hmm.
combination, or I feel disgusted with myself,
Mm-hmm.
or, rather than, this is weird and stupid and why are we even doing that? I mean, it's, if that's where people are at, that's where people are at, but it feels like
Mm-hmm.
it requires more work from me, to help them recognize this is actually a limit to your range of expression that is possible for you to integrate and organize into yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just something that is distasteful to you. And I think that it's kind of
Yes.
a lazy way of avoiding play, is to
Yes.
just kind of label something new that feels overwhelming, um, dumb or silly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think like it's kind of like a learned taste, an acquired taste of like, oh, that was uncomfortable. I wonder what would be on the other side of that if I built a capacity for that discomfort.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah.
it's like the sting of the whiskey or something. Like you can, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's part of the flavor of this
Right.
experience.
Right.
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 And maybe a little sting means actually there's something more over there.
Right. It,
So
like
yeah.
the thirst for freedom, um, being more important, being more important to follow than the kind of preservation of the norms, or the
Mhm.
familiar. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like accepting that after a workout you get sore muscles,
Yeah.
and it's worth it,
Yeah,
you know.
and
So
learning something new is going to be inherently uncomfortable, like 99% of the time.
yes,
So yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, and that's such a big thing because I think a lot of people come to therapy to feel better. I'm supposed
Hmm.
to feel more regulated over time, yes, but I'm supposed to feel more regulated or calm or happy or something like that. And
Hmm.
so that all those expectations get in the way too,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
maybe to get to the top of the mountain, you're going to, get poked by a few bushes or something, So there's one other thing before we sign off. Particularly in this historical time period, I think people are becoming less playful with their identities. And that's a major barrier to what really good comedians are good at is they hold identity lightly. They hold their identity lightly. They hold the identities of others lightly. And there's a play within the differences of identities where it's like, this is my identity, but I have a deeper sense of self that isn't just this identity, And so I think if people realize that coming to therapy is about being playful with identity, like you don't come in as a finished thing. You come in to be reworked. I think of like a woodworker, the log comes in and they're carving or something like you come in for that carving transformation process. And so to come in and be like, I'm here because maybe I'm more like this than I realized. Maybe I want to become more of a person that I was ashamed to be. Like for my own personal life, I was always interested in body movement, but I was ashamed to dance. I did other kinds of movement. And then I realized like, there's this, like, it's just to come back to your example, this being in me that like really wanted to play in that way. And my identity had to move from like, I'm the guy that doesn't dance at the wedding or something to like, I'm the kind of guy that looks forward to that and maybe even wants to be the craziest one if I could really let the rate limiter off, So,
I mean, I know it's not this easy for people because of the conditioning and because of the sort of inertia of this kind of narrowing of one's sense of identity. But I really see it more as, it's like it's the clothes that we're wearing more than it is, say, like the color of our skin, for example. Like I can't change the color of my skin, but I can change the clothes that I'm wearing. Like I can take them off. And put on different clothes. And that's not always easy to do, but it really feels like there is that level of flexibility to some degree to personal identity when it comes to how do I express myself? What am I willing to try? What risks am I willing to take? And I think so often people treat it as a kind of immutable characteristic in themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And so maybe kind of wrapping up these ideas, I think also again of the notion of the imposition that you were talking about earlier. Are we imposing something on clients or at least inviting them into something? And for me, I hope I'm offering not just the things we're talking about, which is all good, but like to move away from like, I am this person with this resume or whatever, and more like I am the energy in my body. I am my intuition. I am my dreams and the symbols and the hopes and the fantasies, and that there's a deeper identity to be had when you drop below the like socio-political, ultimately in my view, very superficial. So like in that way, I feel like we're offering a kind of a transmission of sorts in a kind of spiritual sense, if that could be so,
I don't know what the word is. I don't think that's too lofty. I think there's something really sacred about that part of this work. And we're not the kind of, objective experts on spirituality, but that is part of this, Yeah.
And exactly. And there is something there. And like, without having to have like some developed religious justification for it or something, it ultimately just ends up like following the life energy. And that leads us into a deeper sense of identity. So,
cool.
So this is cool. I feel like we've really mapped a bit of a territory here.
I agree. I agree. Nice. Awesome.
Cool. Well, let's sign off officially and then we'll talk for a moment.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
All right. So, okay. Thanks for coming. Okay. Bye. How's that for a sign off? Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.